very clear, challenging expectations. Kids, rise to our expectations. St. Josemaria said, demand through affection. Don't demand crankily, don't demand firmly, demand with affection, and you'll get what you want. So that's that issue of high but reasonable expectations. We had Father Chris Riley, famous for, youth on the streets, youth off the streets, come and talk at Redfield. And it was a group of parents and senior students, and he just said to the parents, point blank between the eyes, have the courage to demand greatness from the children in your care. So be demanding, but do it with affection. And obviously, if you raise kids in an atmosphere where we keep challenging them positively. I'll give you an example. The last school I've been at has some Croatian families, and some of those Croatian families have marvellously strong faith. I suppose because they've been through the mill, etc., back home. And I was talking to one of the boys about the fact that they say the rosary at home. I knew they said the rosary at home. I knew Mum worked shifts. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty good effort. How does Dad organise that? And Dad comes home, he's a tradie. He comes home, and then the kids he sorts out the kids, have dinner, and then the boy in year 10 told me, and Dad says, would you like to say the rosary? But he says it in such a way, and it's so encouraging that we always say it. Isn't that nice? But knowing how to encourage and put kids in a space where they want to come with you is obviously a blessing, but you don't get very far compelling teenagers. You've got to have a better strategy than that. What about example? Another one of my friends teaching with me, his little boy came up to him and said, Dad, I know what you like. And Dad sort of puffs his chest out. He thinks the boy's going to say, you don't love your family or something. He says, Dad, you like to watch the cricket and drink beer. That was what the boy's taken home, right? Isn't it interesting? We don't sometimes know what example is doing in the guys' minds. Excuse me a sec, I'll catch up. I have to tell you about I've got a story about unity between parents. Sorry about this, I'm backtracking. One of the guys, again one of the teachers, who's also a parent in the school, get out of your way, sorry, was driving home on Valentine's Day. And his son, who's 10 years old, said, Dad, you're going to stop and buy Mum some flowers. Now, the kid's pretty forthright, I know him. And the boy and the dad said to his son, I don't believe in all that commercial nonsense. And then the boy says to his dad, Dad, it's not what you believe in, it's what Mum likes. And he stopped, he got the flowers, and he had the humility to talk about it the next day in the staff room. How's that? And they had a great night, obviously. But it's amazing, isn't it? The chaplain at Tangara, which is our sister school, used to always insist the most important virtue for parents is humility. That you're prepared to say you're sorry, you're prepared to listen to the kids, etc., etc. Customs of communication. I love that quote at the bottom of it. Couple of thoughts on this. This thing of customs of communication is obviously very important. When Redfield started, I was teaching primary as well as secondary. I'm a background an English teacher. And I was telling the kids in a religion class in year 3 these silly stories I'd made up about Rufus and Brutus. Rufus is the guy that always gets it right. Brutus learns the hard way every time. And I make up these stories on the spot, and I forget them the next day. This guy comes up to me when he's in year 11, in the playground. He tells me the story word for word that he'd heard from me in 3rd class. And then he asked me, and what happened next? What's that tell us about how kids, when you've got them in your, when they're in your hand, everything's going in, and you only need to say it once. And you can imagine if you're a parent who has these sorts of conversations every night with each of your kids, that's a challenge. But how much you're preparing your young charges for life. Big issue, obviously. Good one. Mrs. Cosgrove is the mother of a friend of mine I went to uni with. She's now well and truly gone to her reward, but she raised 6 boys in the country in Oberon, and very humble house, right? And she said, these are her words, when one of my sons comes home and I realise that something's on his mind, and I thought she was going to say, I ask him what's wrong. But she said, how wise is this? I put on the kettle and I tell him a good story. To know how to loosen your kids up. Technology, big one, isn't it? I went to a conference at Parliament House in Sydney. There was an academic there talking about the influence of violent video games on children. There's a guy called Wayne Warburton. This is last year. Susan Greenfield was there as well, the Baroness. And he said, look, every conference I talk at, I present the information that study after study shows that there are 3 main effects of violent videos on kids. That they're aggressive in the short term, they're desensitised, they think violence is normal, and thirdly, they're a bit paranoid. They start to perceive threats where there is no threat, in people and in situations. And the data on this now is overwhelming, he said. But of course, every time I talk about this at a conference, very quickly in the next couple of days, there are articles in the newspaper from other academics who are in the funding of video gaming companies who say, oh no, the jury's out on all of this. And exactly what he prophesied happened. 2 days later, the next day the Sydney Morning Herald reported his conference contribution, and the day afterwards, an academic had an article in contrary to what he was saying. So, you know, we've got to be on sure ground. You know, for little kids, violent videos, and half the video games are violent, right? You've got to be cautious. It's changing their worldview. It's not helping them learn to trust in God for a start, right? This is the one I was going to show you. Now, I've got to work out how to get to that. Here we go. Now, this little guy is 10 months old. He's about to be presented with his favourite toy. His father worked for me at Wallamon. Here we go. Watch this. There is a voiceover which we haven't got, I'm sorry. Whoa. Why isn't that playing? This is technology's revenge because I've been criticising it. Maybe we'll try... No? Maybe I'll show this to you later. I've got it on a stick. We might try it on the stick in a different way. But what happens? It's just crazy. He gets his favourite toy put down there, and the father is saying, you know, come to Moosey, and the kid's there and just can't get any movement up, you know? And then Dad puts his iPhone on the carpet, and the kid just strides across it. And then he moves it, and the kid goes after it. Very interesting. So, I mean, it's, you know, in itself it's not a terrible thing, but gee, it makes you think, right? Okay, next. Let your child wear his or her mistakes. It's an obvious one, but don't bail your kids out. I haven't been primed to say this by the staff who are here, but if your kids don't do their homework, don't write them a note. Let them sort it out. Let them explain themselves. If you really need to, ring the teacher on the side and say, my son hasn't done his homework, I've told him to sort it out with you. Right? But don't bail him out or her. Right? Let them sort out their own problems. There's far worse things that are going to happen to them in life. Everybody in the school is on their side. So, you know, if they can't manage themselves in this environment, how are they going to cope outside? So don't come to the rescue of kids at school. This is a very different issue. If your son tells you something about somebody hassling him, don't say man up, right? Certainly bring it to the attention of the school. That's different. But if it's something that's self-inflicted, some mistake he's made, certainly he or she should sort it out themselves. This is a nice story. I'll tell you a silly story first. That's the motto in Latin of Redfield. When we first printed that motto, we got, where it says liberabit, we put liberavit. We made a spelling mistake. Unfortunately, it has a profound change in meaning. Liberavit means the truth used to set you free, but it doesn't. That was embarrassing. Another true story. I come from a school of shoplifters, so one of our students was shoplifting, 5th class, and came to school. The shopkeeper had rung and said, "Oh, I've got one of your students here. He's been shoplifting." Okay, send him to school. Came to school, and we said, "Mate, Dad's got to know about this." And the boy went white. We knew Dad was fairly forthright. And no, you've got to go home and tell Dad tonight about this, and we're going to talk about it tomorrow. We rang Dad and said, "Your son's got something to tell you, but please hear him out." And the boy went home, told his dad. Dad rang us the next day to say, "Thank you. I've had the best conversation I've ever had with my son. My son grew 6 inches last night." I think it's a win. But then, when that boy leaves school, sorry, I wound up. When that boy leaves school, we're talking about 8 years later, I asked his class to write what was their best memory of school. And he wrote about the day that he had that conversation with his dad. Isn't that amazing how everybody deep inside has this desire to be truthful, but sometimes we don't have the courage to be truthful. So don't make it hard for your kids to tell the truth. That's the issue. Somebody was telling me at Adfa that there's a policy that as long as you tell the truth, you'll get another chance. But if you don't tell the truth, it lands on you.